Hi, my name is Anik and welcome to today's presentation about abnormal repetitive behavior in zoo elephants. Before we get started, I'll give you a short overview of what you can expect within the next 15 minutes. We'll first have a look at wild elephants and talk about their natural environment and behavior before moving on to elephants in captivity. We'll focus on animals in zoos and on how these environments can cause so-called stereotypic or abnormal repetitive behavior. How can this kind of environment affect the health of captive elephants? Can abnormal repetitive behavior be prevented? How can research help improve the lives of these magnificent mammals? And what can we do to give elephants a life worth living? We'll answer all these questions within the next 15 minutes. Elephants are the largest land animals currently living on our planet. They live in groups of 5 to 20 individuals. While mothers and daughters are inseparable, male calves stay with their mother until the age of 12 before heading off on their own or joining an all-male group. Asian elephants roam around in territories of 100 to 1,000 square kilometers, while African elephants live on ranges of 11 to 500 square kilometers. In the wild, elephants can easily reach the age of 60 years and more. Their survival depends upon seasonal migration over large distances to find food and water, as well as social and reproductive partners. These herbivores consume about 100 kilograms of food and 200 liters of water each day. Elephants have a rich and complex social life. They can recognize themselves in mirrors, solve problems, and even use tools. Thanks to their excellent memory, elephants remember important sources of water and food, and even recognize certain conspecifics along the migration route. These social animals use their trunks to greet and touch one another and produce specific calls and sounds to communicate with each other. So, what happens when these intelligent and social animals are locked up in zoos? Although few scientific studies focus on the activities and behavioral health of elephants in captivity, the topic is often raised during animal welfare debates. Zoos do find it difficult to create environments for elephants that mimic the foraging behavior of wild conspecifics. In nature, elephants roam around all day, spending up to 80% of their time feeding. In captivity, elephants no longer have to seek food and water. Instead, they are left with few activities, which can lead to increased stereotypic behavior. Another important aspect that may cause abnormal repetitive behavior is space allowance. The 2008 study of the University of Bristol on the welfare, housing and husbandry of 77 zoo elephants based in the UK is a good example to illustrate this problem. Researchers observed 41 Asian and 36 African elephants and the effect their environment had on the performance of stereotypic or abnormal repetitive behavior. Looking at the available outdoor space, elephants based in the UK have between 280 and 36,422 square meters to get a bit of fresh air. The total amount of indoor space ranges between 17.9 and 560 square meters. Going back to our elephants in the wild, we can notice that elephants in zoos have less space. As you might remember, Asian elephants living in the wild have territories varying from 100 to 1,000 square kilometers, while African elephants are used to living in areas of 11 to 500 square kilometers. When elephants are given less space, more abnormal repetitive behavior might occur. When looking at the results of the 2008 study, they confirm that outdoor space as well as indoor space play a very important role in the development of stereotypic behavior. Elephants provided with less outdoor space stereotype more. 54% of the observed animals displayed abnormal repetitive behavior during daytime. But also indoor space allowance can have an effect on the elephant's well-being, whereas animals spending the night in small indoor confinements tend to be more vulnerable to stereotypic behavior. Almost half of the Asian elephants and a quarter of the African elephants performed abnormal repetitive behavior, which lasted 3 times longer in Asian elephants. When we look at the age, older elephants tend to display more abnormal repetitive behavior than young ones. Unfortunately, none of the confinements provided enough space for the elephants to perform normal walking behavior. In captivity, elephants walk an average of 5.3 kilometers per day, while free-roaming elephants walk 5 to 10 kilometers, figures that might vary during migration. So now that we know the origin of abnormal repetitive behavior, we can have a look at how these so-called stereotypies are visible in zoo elephants. Swaying and weaving, head nodding and pacing are considered to be the most common abnormal repetitive behaviors seen in elephants, along with rubbing tusks on bars and ropes and moving trunks in a repetitive and unvarying way. These kinds of behaviors tend to be unnatural, meaning that they don't occur in nature. That's why abnormal repetitive behavior can often be seen as a consequence of the impossibility to perform activities which elephants would display in the wild. We can distinguish two types of abnormal repetitive behavior. First, we have the frustration-induced stereotypic behavior, which is driven by fear, physical discomfort, or motivational frustration, which may indicate an underlying welfare problem. As we've already mentioned, elephants perform this kind of behavior in an attempt to replace a missing natural behavior, but they can also make an effort to escape or to cope with their current situation. Secondly, we have the malfunctioning-induced stereotypic behavior, which is an indication of a malfunctioning central nervous system. This kind of abnormal repetitive behavior may be linked to past problems more than current ones. Stereotypic behavior does not necessarily cause reduced welfare, but it can be linked to poor welfare brought about by barren or small environments. Elephants can also display abnormal repetitive behavior when experiencing pain, injury or distress, or when they are confronted with social stressors such as the presence of humans. Now that we know what stereotypic behavior is and how it is brought about, we'll focus on the possible health implications. Stereotypic behavior is linked to stress, and when stress becomes chronic, it can have an impact on the animal's overall health. These abnormal repetitive behaviors can be seen as warning signals indicating potential welfare issues. Elephants in captivity may experience reduced immune responses to pathogens, which may cause increased parasite loads and infections. Chronic stress can also bring about poor wound healing, fertility and weight problems, as well as chronically elevated blood pressure and gastric ulceration. Unfortunately, in worst case, elephants might die prematurely. Once elephants develop abnormal repetitive behavior, it can be difficult, if not impossible, to eradicate it completely. There seems to be a significant correlation between overall welfare and age, suggesting that older elephants may experience poorer welfare. This can indicate that injury or illness increases with age, but it can also reflect an elephant's history, certainly when the animal has lived in unacceptable housing. Another aspect worth mentioning is longevity in captive elephants. If, like some scientists propose, lifespan is a good way to measure welfare, then elephants aren't the luckiest animals in the zoo. Not only do they experience poorer welfare than their wild conspecifics, these captive elephants have a median lifespan which is half that of elephants living in the wild. Even working elephants in India tend to have better lives if we do consider longevity to be a welfare indicator. Although abnormal repetitive behavior may sometimes be ignored or explained away by zoo staff, it is important to find solutions to deal with it. There are different methods to minimize abnormal repetitive behavior in zoo animals, from genetic selection and the use of pharmacological agents to active reinforcement of non-stereotypic behavior with rewards. Environmental enrichment is probably the most common method used to tackle abnormal repetitive behavior. Changes to the structure and content of enclosures, as well as changes in husbandry, like a reduction in public display or visitor noise, can help prevent unnecessary stress. Good enrichments may reduce underlying frustrations and related stress levels. This may give captive animals more time to perform preferred behavior. However, the key to successful enrichment hasn't been found yet. Some animals might find changes in environment frightening or stressful, causing even more anxiety. Enrichments can cause resource defense aggression or evoke even more abnormal repetitive behavior. Enrichment never seems to work 100%. Only half of the attempts to reduce stereotypic behavior with enrichment are successful. Considering abnormal repetitive behavior is an ongoing problem, it has long been used in welfare assessments. Still, it is quite challenging to know if animals displaying neglectable stereotypic behavior are experiencing better welfare compared to conspecifics with higher levels of abnormal repetitive behavior. Apathetic behavior, or elephants trying to hide, might encounter poorer welfare compared to conspecifics showing explicit stereotypic behavior. So is focusing on stereotypic or abnormal repetitive behavior enough in an attempt to improve elephants' welfare? Routine welfare assessments can also help to monitor behavior and prevent unnecessary suffering. These objective and regular analysis make it possible to monitor and measure any improvements into elephant welfare. Detailed findings may improve welfare standards. Finding out what elephants like and dislike can also improve their welfare. For example, African elephants don't like human disturbance and walking uphill. If they have to live in steep enclosures, which are surrounded by zoo visitors during the day, they probably won't like their stay. Asian elephants, on the other hand, get terrified when they hear the sound of raging bees. They are also very sensitive to temperature differences. To give an example, low environmental temperature can increase stereotypic behavior in Asian elephants. So, I guess it is clear by now that animal welfare has a lot to do with feelings, which makes it very difficult to measure. However, certain behaviors, cognitive and physiological responses, as well as possible effects on reproduction and health can be indicators. They all have benefits and disadvantages. However, more knowledge and information is needed to make captive elephants' life worth living, which can be achieved with interdisciplinary and cross-cultural collaboration. There are a couple of things that we can do ourselves in an attempt to make the lives of these animals better. For example, we can share our knowledge about elephants with friends and family and follow non-profit organizations on social media to stay up to date with the latest news on these wonderful creatures. We can support sanctuaries and other non-for-profit organizations that help elephants. We can donate and we can volunteer. For those of you who might be interested in science and animal welfare, the NGO for Elephants is worth following. This organization uses science to improve the lives of zoo elephants in order to prevent captive extinction. Be sure to check their website as well as their weekly podcast. So, what have we learned today? We've learned that free-roaming elephants enjoy spacious tropical or subtropical environments in Africa and Asia, sharing their territory with familiar conspecifics. Captive elephants, on the other hand, are sentenced to smaller and less challenging zoo environments in which they are confronted with stressful situations which may lead to the performance of abnormal repetitive behavior. Elephants are often seen bobbing their heads and swaying back and forth. Most animals perform abnormal repetitive behavior to cope with their current situation, although past experiences, as well as a malfunctioning central nervous system, can also evoke these so-called stereotypies or abnormal repetitive behavior. The inability to forage, as well as a space limitation, play an important role in the possible development of stereotypic behavior. As we've seen, most in- and outdoor facilities aren't sufficient in order to let elephants perform natural behavior. Enrichment might help, but it isn't always the solution. Their endless public display isn't helping either. Although we know a lot more about elephants today than a couple of decades ago, more research definitely is needed to help them have a life worth living. Let's hope the future will be brighter for these magnificent animals. Thank you for your attention.